Greetings, family. This is Freedom and Saroma L, coming to you live from the US of A, offering up a little something for African Liberation Day. Enjoy. Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ship. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit. My hands were made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We're forward in this generation, triumphantly. Won't you help to sing this song of freedom? It's all I ever had, redemption song. Won't you help to sing this song of freedom? It's all I ever had, yes, redemption song. Wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Yes, the world won't get no better. Oh, we gotta change the world, just you and me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We must go back to the old days, oh, where our people followed the ancient ways, where the spirit of peace and love ruled all of mankind. And without that spirit, well, you know we fell behind. But I possess the secret, and it's called by the elders Sankofa, Sankofa. Well, it's peace and love.
This track is not an attack upon the American people. It's an attack upon the system within which they live. Since 1945, the United States has attempted to overthrow more than 50 foreign governments. In the process, the US has caused the end of life for several million people and condemned many millions more to a life of agony and despair. The strength of your dreaming prevents you from reason. The American dream only makes sense if you're sleeping. It's just a cruel fantasy. Their politics took my voice away, but their music gave it back to me. The land where the lumpen are consumed by consumption, killing themselves to shovel down food in abundance. I guess a rapper from Britain is a rare voice. America is capitalism on steroids. Natives kept in casinos and reservations. Displaced slaves never given reparations. Take everything from Native Americans and wonder why I call it the racist experiment. Afraid of your melanin, the same as it's ever been. That ain't gonna change with the race of the president. I see imperialism under your skin tone. You could call it Christopher Columbus syndrome.
Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Doesn't make any difference when they form your nation. Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Doesn't make any difference when they form your nation.
The world's entertainer, the world's devastator. From Venezuela to Mesopotamia. Your cameras lie cause they have to hide the savage crimes committed on leaders that happen to try and nationalize eating competitions while the world's been starving. Beat up communism with the help of Bin Laden. Where would your war of terror be without that man? Every day you create more Nidal Hassans. Kill a man from the military, you're a weirdo. But kill a wog from the Middle East, you're a hero. Your country is causing screams that never reach your ear holes. America inflicted 1 million ground zeros. Follow the dollar and swallow your humanity. Soldiers committing savagery you never even have to see. Those mad at me, writing emails angrily. I'm not anti-America, America is anti-me.
Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Doesn't make any difference when they bomb your nation. Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Is it Obama's nation or an abomination? Doesn't make any difference when they bomb your nation.
I don't care if him and Cheney are long lost relations. What matters more is the policies. I lost my patience. Stop debating, bringing race into the conversation. Occupation and cooperation equals profit making. It's over, people wake up from the dream now. Nobel Peace Prize, Jay-Z on speed dial. It's the substance within, not the color of your skin. Are you the puppeteer or the puppet on the string? So many believed it was instantly gonna change. There was still Dennis Ross, Brzezinski and Robert Gates. What happened to Chaz Freeman? What happened to Tristan Anderson? It's a machine that keeps that man breathing. I have the heart to say what all these other rappers aren't. Words like Iraq, Palestine, Afghanistan. The war's on and you morons were all wrong. I call Obama a bomber cause those are your bomb, your bomb, your bomb.
Greetings, sisters and brothers, on this African Liberation Day 2022. Always a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this commemoration when we all come together to discuss where we are, what we have accomplished, and the work ahead. A lot needs to be done, as we've been struggling for centuries against colonialism, against imperialism, and against all the evils that are destroying lives in our communities throughout the world. African people worldwide must come together. And when we come together to discuss, to see things, and to move ahead, to forward ahead, this is where our liberation will come from. In the situation in Haiti, but before I go there, I want to pay special tribute to Brother Kwame Ture, to Brother Kwame Nkrumah, and to the many sisters and brothers, our foremothers and forefathers, and the present strugglers for justice, who have led the way and are showing us the way today and are preaching by their examples of day-to-day struggle for our liberation. In Haiti today, we are seeing the same thing is going on, where Haiti has been in the clutches of imperialist attacks from way back centuries, but I want to focus on the present situation. From the coup d'etat of 2004 against president elected, against the elected president of Haiti, democratically elected Jean-Bertrand Aristide, to the present, it's been 18 years of continuing US, UN occupation, United States, United Nations occupation, during which time the conditions in Haiti have never been worse for our people. When we are looking at what's going on in Haiti today, we are seeing that the predictions, not the predictions, but the promises of a terror campaign by members of Haiti's oligarchy. One of them identified himself publicly in a video. We are talking this happened in 2016. And the other one didn't identify himself, but he did a voice message that where it was he announced the campaign, the terror campaign that will be waged against the Haitian population. And since November of 2016, the end of November of 2016, and early December of 2016 to the present, all of these announced campaign of repression and terror is coming to pass, and this is what's happening today. So the coup of 2004 started it. It was ongoing under United Nations occupation troops, which is still continuing. And today we have what they are calling gangs, but don't think these are gangs. These are paramilitaries, organized, financed, and developed throughout the country to make the country a living hell for our sisters and brothers. Land thefts, land grabs are taking place where people are terrorized and forced off their lands. And so what we have is our people having to flee Haiti, just as that member of the oligarchy had promised. And he also stated that he would be using Haitians who have gone to school, those so-called educated Haitians, so-called educated Haitians. And he said they can't resist a little money, so they can be telling our people lies to put them to sleep. And as Brother Malcolm X said, just like Novocaine, to make us think that they are not doing anything to us. And so what we are seeing is the development of this campaign of terror. And this is being played, this announcement of the campaign of terror. Many Haitians are aware of it. It's played on the radios, and so that we don't forget, so that we can understand the exact nature of this. Now, Haiti being made a living hell. People are running out of Haiti. A lot of our brothers and sisters end up refugees in many lands throughout the Caribbean, countries of the Americas, in Africa, in North America, US and Canada. And so what's going on is that there is also a brain drain where many of our young brothers and sisters who can't make a living after their schooling are forced to leave Haiti. And so the country is being bled systematically. Our resources, the gold, copper, the marble that we have, our resources are being stolen, and other resources, they are being stolen. Our people who are, I hate to use the term human resources, the future of the country, our beautiful people, our peasants are being forced to flee Haiti. So this is what the situation is. But it's not all doom and gloom, because people are resisting. And that's the hope of Haiti. People are very aware of what's going on. They're aware of the campaign, of the ravages of neo-colonialism, the mental degradation, the mental destruction of our people, along with the physical destruction of the economy, the impoverishment of our people. And Brother Walter Wadney had stated it very well when he had described this process in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. It's the same process.
desculpa, né, para longo atraso que registrado, porque estava previsto para iniciar desde 4 horas, né? Mas suma no país que nós estamos, não tem tido problema com a internet para poder fazer conexão para via. E tem a manga de gente que não participa na manga de países. Então, era necessário para nós também não poder visualizar, para não poder olhar gente que está no outro lado, suma também que eles ainda podem olhar. Mas dada a dificuldade de internet que nós estamos na registra nesse momento, e que está sendo possível para não poder olhar gente, outros camaradas que estão na outra parte do mundo. Mas é na Albino, e tem uma ligação lá, riba, e está sendo possível, eles é na Albino, é na Ojano, mas não tem tido dificuldade para fazer projeção na televisão lá para por eles. A ver que ela não pedi desculpa a todos camaradas que estão ali desde 4 horas, aqueles que tinham 4h30, 5 horas, que nunca foi capaz de dar início a essa atividade que simpósio internacional, simpósio ideológico internacional. Então, para já, gosto não vai dar início, mesmo. Parte na cerimônia de abertura dessa sessão, nós convidamos o camarada, presidente do partido, o engenheiro Domingos Simões Pereira. Em seguida, nós convidamos a quarta vice-presidente de PAGC, Maria Adiato. Em seguida, nós convidamos o embaixador de Cuba, que está ali conosco. Em seguida, nós convidamos Luiz Melo Silva, membro da Comissão Permanente. Em seguida, nós convidamos combatente de Liberdade e Pátria, camarada Teodora Inácia Gomes. Em seguida, nós convidamos secretária-geral de UDIMO, camarada Bloni Nantamba Nhassi. Mas um de nós tinha que estar ali para poder organizar tudo isso. Por isso, então, obrigado. Bom, suma e simpósio internacional, nós temos está a decorrer, nós temos tradutores tanto para inglês, francês, português, espanhol. Então, nós vamos continuar papel crioulo, gosto não vai começar papel no português para poder facilitar intérpretes que estão na online nesse momento, para poder facilitar a interpretação de português para francês, para inglês e para próprio espanhol. Como eu dizia antes, muito obrigado a todos e pedimos sinceras desculpas pelo atraso. Nós vamos dar início agora ao Simpósio Ideológico Internacional, cujo o lema é preparando o salto rumo à unidade pan-africanista mundial. O neocolonialismo deve ser desmantelado totalmente. Então, este é o lema, né, que foi adotado para este simpósio. Então, nós vamos ir rápido, convidar o presidente do partido, PAGC, engenheiro Domingos Simões Pereira, para dar a abertura deste simpósio com o discurso de abertura.
Nome da direção dirigir-se. Quero saudar a presença da camarada Teodora Inácia Gomes, saudá-la em nome e em representação dos combatentes da liberdade da pátria. Obrigado por estar cá. Quero saudar a camarada Adieto de Alona Digna, enquanto membro da mesa de direção, alguém que claramente incorpora este sentimento e esta vivência internacionalista. Obrigado. Quero saudar o camarada Luís Melo, Luís da Silva Melo, em nome e representação da nossa comissão permanente. Quero saudar a camarada Bloni Nhamanantamba Nhasse, secretária-geral da UDE, nossa organização das mulheres, a Dionísio Pereira, secretário-geral da JAC, sobretudo do seu esforço e a sua dedicação, esta prova de militantismo, essa determinação com que se entrega a nossa luta pan-africana, saudar o nosso camarada Imani Nomoja. Eu quero dizer que é um privilégio o PAIGC receber esta manifestação na casa da Amílcar Cabral. Porque Amílcar Cabral, tal como Kwame Nkrumah, tal como Frantz Fanon, tal como vários internacionalistas, nunca tiveram dúvida de que a luta que conduziram não era uma luta geográfica. Era uma luta baseada na nossa ideologia, a ideologia da libertação. E sempre disseram que lá onde houvesse opressão, o homem tinha a obrigação de se levar para enfrentar essa opressão. Lá onde houvesse colonialismo, o homem tinha a obrigação de se levantar para lutar contra o colonialismo. Hoje, nós enfrentamos outro tipo de privação. Nós enfrentamos várias irregularidades no mundo. Enfrentamos várias distorções. Recentemente, o nosso Parlamento votou por unanimidade o fim do bloqueio a Cuba. Esse não é um pedido que os povos livres fazem ao mundo ocidental. Esta é uma exigência do nosso tempo. Uma exigência de que esse bloqueio já dura tempo demais. Já dura tempo demais. Já se causou males irreparáveis a esse país, pequeno em termos de espaço, mas um país gigante por aquilo que tem representado no mundo. Eu recentemente, quando se discutia a questão do Covid, e todos os países desenvolviam esforços no sentido de encontrar o antídoto para esse mal que de repente atingiu todo o planeta, tive a oportunidade de me reunir com o senhor embaixador de Cuba. E nessa altura, quando países do Ocidente trabalhavam afincadamente para conseguir uma vacina contra a Covid, Cuba, esse tal pequeno país, mas que realmente é um país gigante, estava trabalhando em 5 vacinas. 5 vacinas. Uma vacina para quem contraísse o Covid pela primeira vez, uma vacina para todos aqueles que eram doentes crônicos, de doenças como tuberculose, com outro tipo de doença, vacina para os mais jovens, para pessoas, vamos dizer, infantes, antes de atingirem os 6 anos de idade, uma vacina para os mais velhos. Cuba estava na linha da frente deste exercício de salvar a humanidade. Então nós temos que ser capazes de questionar. Um país que se entrega à causa da humanidade, o que é que justifica que a humanidade o mantenha preso em relação aos seus direitos econômicos, aos seus direitos políticos, aos seus direitos sociais e culturais? Por isso, eu sei que esta jornada não é dedicada a Cuba, mas Cuba é uma ilustração clara de como a nossa luta só faz sentido quando nós tivermos por detrás uma ideologia. É aquilo que Cabral dizia. Ninguém segue um partido, ninguém segue um político por gostar desse partido ou por gostar desse político. As pessoas, as massas, seguem os partidos se esses partidos têm ideologia, se têm um propósito, se têm uma missão na vida. E aquilo que a convocação deste encontro nos propõe é renovar a nossa determinação em ter ideologia, em ter propósito e de consagrar toda a nossa vida, toda a nossa capacidade, toda a nossa competência a lutar contra a injustiça, a lutar para que os direitos humanos não sejam propriedades de alguns, que seja de facto um direito que todo o ser humano deve ter acesso como um direito fundamental. Por isso, eu quero terminar agradecendo a nossa juventude, agradecendo as mulheres, agradecendo a nossa escola ideológica ter nos dado esta oportunidade de, mais uma vez, na casa da Amílcar Cabral, o PAIGC renovar o seu compromisso no sentido de sempre lutar, de pôr toda a sua energia para que a causa do pan-africanismo seja colocado no sentido do combate do neocolonialismo e para que a justiça a nível mundial possa, de facto, prevalecer. É com estas palavras que eu quero declarar aberto o nosso simpósio internacional e que esperamos que durante esta jornada vamos poder aprender com outros camaradas que estão noutras latitudes, mas que somos todos cidadãos do mundo e, portanto, comprometidos com estes desafios. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, camarada presidente. Agora vamos chamar a facilitadora Ana Muzi, que vai ser a facilitadora no primeiro tema deste simpósio. Não sei se a Ana está a me ouvir.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, revolutionary greetings, Africans, and all our allies. I would like to welcome you to the panel on Pan-Africanist movement, fight against neo-colonialism. For many years, we have been deluded to believe that Africa is independent. But in reality, what was achieved in the late 1950s, right up to the 1990s, was flag independence. From that time, African countries have had their economies and their political policies controlled by their former colonial powers through various neo-colonial mechanisms. As we begin our commemorations for the year 2020, African Liberation Day, this panel on Pan-Africanist movement, fight against neo-colonialism, presents evidence of a struggle that still continues, but of a certain victory anchored in Pan-African ideology. We have a number of people who will be speaking from Guinea-Bissau, the Western Sahara, and we had a presenter from Eritrea, but unfortunately, he's unable to make it. And we'll also hear from the Cuban ambassador. To kickstart this African Liberation Day panel presentation, I'll begin by inviting the Secretary General of the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau to speak to us about the struggle against neo-colonialism in a very hotly contested zone. I believe in his presentation, he will also be able to highlight some of the linkages between neo-colonialism and some reactionary nationalist movements attempting to solve neo-colonial problems. I believe it's Comrade Dionisio, and I would like to welcome you to begin. Thank you. Before you begin, you have about 10 minutes to make your presentation, and 1 minute towards the end, I'll be able to let you know so that you can make your concluding statements.
Mais uma vez, boa tarde, e nós vamos partilhar em nome da Guiné-Bissau a experiência da Guiné-Bissau, porque este ano, a comemoração deste simpósio, cada país tem 10 minutos para partilhar sua experiência de luta contra o neocolonialismo. O tema que foi dado à Guiné-Bissau tem a ver com os países que proclamaram o Estado, mas que, na verdade, ainda estão a lutar para a consolidação da sua independência. Primeiro, a nossa reflexão de hoje sobre o tema que foi proposto é de que um dos problemas que nós temos em África, que também é o caso da Guiné-Bissau, é que os estados que foram implantados pelo poder colonial, não era um Estado para servir o povo africano, né? Eram Estados cujo objetivo era explorar o povo africano para servir os cidadãos que faziam parte dos países colonizadores. No caso da Guiné-Bissau, o Estado de Guiné Portuguesa não era para servir os interesses do povo da Guiné-Bissau, mas sim para servir a Lisboa. Então, por isso que, desde logo, Amílcar Cabral dizia que a nossa luta não visava apenas ter bandeira, ter hino ou apenas proclamar o Estado, mas visa essencialmente mudar as condições da nossa população. Quer dizer, condições econômicas, dar acesso à educação que foi negada à nossa população, transformar a nossa economia, sermos dono da nossa economia, mas que, infelizmente, muitos países, assim como a Guiné-Bissau, nós não conseguimos montar o Estado, né, que seja capaz de atender essas necessidades. O que aconteceu é que muitos países, como a Guiné, tentaram acabar com o Estado colonial que havia na época, tentaram adaptar o modelo do Estado, que, na verdade, temos tido dificuldade em fazer esse Estado funcionar. Então, a nossa luta hoje de consolidação da independência tem muito a ver com isso, a forma como nós começamos. Temos um Estado que foi proclamado sem uma nação. Esse é o contexto, porque muitos países, por exemplo, da Europa, após a Segunda Guerra Mundial, após várias guerras na Europa, podemos constatar que os países, a sociedade europeia são quase homogênea. Então, nessas sociedades é muito fácil implementar a democracia. É muito mais fácil implementar um Estado coeso e sólido, porque há uma nação. O texto da Guiné-Bissau, fomos desafiados ao texto multiétnico e multirracial. Funciona muito bem, há uma nação, mas no contexto da Guiné-Bissau, ainda nós não temos nação. Nós temos, talvez, podemos chamar de pequenas nações, que, na verdade, precisamos de unificar e tornar uma grande nação guineense. Então, óbvio que essa luta não tem sido fácil, porque, como nós ainda vivemos no contexto de neocolonialismo, que significa dominação indireta, dominação econômica, dominação social, dominação militar. E essa luta não tem sido fácil por causa disso, porque hoje, apesar de Guiné-Bissau ter proclamado a independência, apesar de Guiné-Bissau ter içado a sua bandeira, apesar de Guiné-Bissau ter formado o seu governo, mas ainda não somos independentes politicamente. Não somos independentes economicamente. Ainda não somos independentes militarmente, porque continuamos a depender dos próprios colonizadores. São eles que a nossa economia depende diretamente da economia dos colonizadores. O nosso sistema militar também é dependente dos colonizadores, e isso tem dificultado bastante a organização do próprio Estado da Guiné-Bissau. Porque o modo de produção que o Amílcar Cabral falava na altura, que a luta de libertação visava termos controle de modo de produção e da própria economia, ainda continua uma miragem no nosso país, assim como em vários países africanos. Mas entendemos que, com essa luta, temos certeza que a Guiné-Bissau não está sozinha, né? É preciso ainda intensificar a cooperação com outros países que têm passado pelas mesmas dificuldades igual a Guiné-Bissau. Nós temos cooperado com países que também lutaram pela independência, caso de Angola, Moçambique, Cabo Verde, outros países, assim como países na América do Sul, né? E Caribe e América Central, que é o caso de Venezuela, Cuba e demais países. E acreditamos que a Guiné-Bissau sozinha, assim como qualquer país, nunca vai conseguir erradicar o neocolonialismo sozinho. É preciso uma coordenação entre os países, sobretudo no momento em que vivemos. Em termos econômicos, vivemos uma era que se chama era de capital improdutivo. É que o imperialismo econômico tem explorado muitos países na América Latina, África, e que hoje muitos governos têm tido dificuldade em explorar seus próprios recursos por causa do capitalismo financeiro. Saímos de uma era onde a mercadoria gerava dinheiro. Hoje estamos numa era em que o dinheiro gera o próprio dinheiro. O proletariado está mais enfraquecido. Os burgueses que investiam nas indústrias para gerar emprego, hoje não fazem mais isso, fazem mais aplicações financeiras. Sendo isso uma realidade comum a todos os países africanos, nós acreditamos que é preciso que haja uma cooperação, uma coordenação, apoio, sobretudo, aos países que necessitam de apoio, como é o caso da Guiné-Bissau, para enfrentar o neocolonialismo. E é preciso deixar claro que, quando falamos de neocolonialismo, não estamos a falar apenas de os países europeus que nos colonizaram. Infelizmente, a Guiné-Bissau tem tido problemas também com alguns países africanos que querem também seguir esse infeliz caminho de exploração de povo para povo. É preciso que os nossos parceiros estejam atentos a isso. Que alguns países africanos têm sido usados como ferramentas de própria Sim, como eu dizia, que alguns países têm sido usados como ferramentas de alguns países imperialistas para explorarem os seus próprios irmãos em África. Também temos que lutar contra essas práticas. Não vou tomar mais tempo. Gostaria de agradecer à facilitadora Ana e dizer que a Guiné-Bissau, o partido PAGC, Partido Africano da Independência de Guiné e Cabo Verde, que é um partido pan-africanista, está determinado para continuar essa luta, não só para libertar a Guiné-Bissau, mas também para ajudar na libertação de outros países africanos. Assim como aconteceu no passado, o PGC está aberto para trabalhar com todos os movimentos, todos os parceiros, com vista a tornar Guiné-Bissau e África um continente verdadeiramente independente, economicamente, militarmente e politicamente. Obrigado. Abaixo.
you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation and for mentioning some of the very important, components about Pan-Africanism, which involves and is very much anchored in the solidarity of African people, and how victory lies in the collaboration of the African masses, and how no one single individual country can do it on its own. I would like to right now call our second presenter of this panel, and I'd like to call upon the Cuban ambassador to speak to us about their experience with neo-colonialism and what kind of strategies they have used to be able to build a solid force against colonialism, and to speak to us too about their alliances with the Pan-Africanist movement.
O embaixador de Cuba para partilhar a experiência de Cuba de luta contra o imperialismo e o neocolonialismo. Senhor embaixador.
Gracias. Siete. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Excelentísimo señor ingeniero Domingo Simón Pereira, presidente del Partido Africano para la Independencia de Guinea-Bissau y Cabo Verde. Estimados vicepresidentes que nos acompañan en la tarde de hoy, combatientes de la libertad que nos honran con su presencia en este acto, dirigentes y jóvenes de la juventud panafricanista Amílcar Cabral, estimados compañeros y compañeras, camaradas. Primero quiero agradecer a los organizadores de este evento por el Día de la Liberación de África, por invitarme a pronunciar unas palabras en nombre de mi pueblo, y muy especial al profesor camarada Imani Umoa. Compañeros y compañeras, es motivo de gran orgullo para los cubanos celebrar con ustedes el Día de África y conmemorar el 59 aniversario de la Constitución el 25 de mayo de 1963 de la Organización de la Unidad Africana, devenida luego en Unión Africana, organismo regional que fortalece la integración y la unidad de los países del continente para impulsar su desarrollo. El Día de África es una fecha que refleja la historia reciente del continente africano, caracterizada por un interesante discurso de unificación y de reconocimiento de la cultura africana, que fue marcada durante más de 400 años por fenómenos como la esclavización, la trata transatlántica de esclavos y el colonialismo. La importancia cultural de esta conmemoración no radica únicamente en el reconocimiento histórico de la pluralidad africana, sino que tiene un marcado interés por encontrar alternativas de solución a problemas tales como el racismo y las formas contemporáneas de esclavización. De igual forma, ha enfocado su agenda hacia la dignificación de la cultura y el reconocimiento de las civilizaciones africanas en la historia de la humanidad. Según estadísticas revisadas, la población africana representa el 15% de la población mundial, y aunque hay presencia de personas afrodescendientes en todos los continentes del mundo, se estima que la mayor parte se encuentra en América, concentrándose principalmente en Brasil, Estados Unidos, Colombia, Venezuela, Panamá, las islas del Caribe como Haití, República Dominicana, Jamaica y Cuba. África es parte de la esencia de nuestra patria. Por eso, muchas son las razones que motivan a los cubanos a conmemorar el Día de África. Porque aunque los que tenemos la piel un poquito blanca, llevamos y nos corre por la sangre africana. No se puede comprender en su real magnitud las profundas relaciones entre Cuba y África y nuestra presencia en este continente sin una conciencia plena del aporte de África a la cubanía. La africanidad es una parte esencial de la cubanía. Por eso el comandante en jefe Fidel Castro enfatizó siempre en la deuda moral y en el deber de compensación que los cubanos tenemos con África. En el acto efectuado en Mandela Park, en Jamaica, el día 30 de julio de 1998, Fidel, refiriéndose al noble esfuerzo del pueblo cubano a favor de la liberación de África, dijo, y cito, ¿qué hacíamos nosotros si no pagar nuestra deuda con aquellos que lucharon por nuestra independencia en muchos campos de batalla? Eso es lo que hemos hecho. No merecemos ningún especial reconocimiento, no merecemos ninguna especial gratitud. Simplemente en África hemos cumplido con nuestro deber. Fin de la cita. Y cumpliendo ese deber, casi medio millón de cubanos lucharon en África contra el colonialismo y por la independencia. 2.289 de ellos pagaron el sacrificio supremo de su vida combatiendo en este continente. Cuba nunca ha brindado a África lo que le sobra, sino que ha compartido sus modestas y en ocasiones insuficientes existencia. Así fue desde el primer momento. En 1963, nuestro país había perdido prácticamente la mitad de sus 6.000 médicos existentes en la isla en 1959, y la Argelia recién independizada, abandonada de golpe por casi todo el personal francés especial, no vaciló en enviar una brigada de salud que 59 años después que el mundo, particularmente en cubano, han prestado las más. Ejemplo fehaciente, 36 años en la Facultad de Medicina Raúl Díaz Argüelles, desarrollando un programa formativo de excelencia mediante el cual hace realidad los sueños de jóvenes guineenses y se convierten en protagonistas del sistema de salud de este hermano país. Cuba mantiene relaciones con todos los países del continente africano. las cuales se diversifican y consolidan en disímiles esferas. Contamos con el apoyo firme y unánime de los países de África y de la Unión Africana. África es un baluarte de solidaridad con la Revolución Cubana. Los estados africanos han apoyado masivamente la resolución aprobada por la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas, que cada año exige se ponga fin al criminal bloqueo económico contra nuestro pueblo, impuesto por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, y como señalar aquí, lo cual agradecemos al presidente del partido Domingo, hace ya más de 60 años. Sus dignatarios encabezan la lista de oradores en ese fórum, reclamando con firmeza soberana su fin. Este gesto lo agradecemos extraordinariamente y así se reflejó en el informe central del Partido Comunista de Cuba a su 8º Congreso, donde se trasladó un agradecimiento especial a la Unión Africana por el consistente apoyo a Cuba en esta lucha. La coincidencia de la lucha contra el colonialismo entre los nacientes estados africanos y la Revolución Cubana fue un punto de partida de una relación entre hermanos que hoy, en medio de un complejo panorama económico, político y sanitario, se consolida. Estimados compañeros y compañeras, permítanme terminar parafraseando palabras de nuestro líder histórico Fidel Castro en el acto de imposición de la Orden de Buena Esperanza efectuado en Ciudad del Cabo, Sudáfrica, en 1998, donde dijo, y cito, en nombre de las raíces comunes y la historia que todavía hoy juntos seguimos construyendo, en nombre de todos aquellos hijos de este continente que fueron arrancados de su tierra, vendidos y encadenados, obligados a cruzar el océano y forzados a entregar su sudor y sus vidas en una isla lejana que pronto, sin embargo, fue una nueva patria para ellos. En nombre de los incontables legiones de africanos y descendientes de africanos que lucharon y murieron ya como cubanos por la independencia de Cuba, en nombre de las decenas de miles de cubanos que un día regresaron a África para poner su valor y su sangre al servicio de la libertad del continente, en nombre de los miles y miles que han brindado y están brindando hoy mismo a África todo su saber y su esfuerzo tesonero, en nombre de todo el pueblo cubano que aprendió a saldar con su solidaridad y su internacionalismo aquella deuda contraída con África, decimos hoy, viva el Día de África, viva la liberación de África. Cuba ha sido, es y será un verdadero amigo del continente africano. Viva la amistad y la hermandad entre Cuba y África. Viva la amistad y hermandad entre Cuba y Guinea-Bissau. Hasta la victoria, patria o muerte. Muchas gracias. ¡Viva! 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 ¡Venceremos! ¡Venceremos! ¡Viva!
Viva! Acho. Obrigado, obrigado. Obrigado, camarada embaixador de Cuba. Obrigado, ex-estudantes de Cuba. Em seguida, nós vamos seguir com a atividade. É de lembrar que esse simpósio internacional é uma das atividades alusiva à comemoração do Dia de Libertação Africana, que vai ser amanhã. Também queremos lembrar a todos que amanhã haverá uma marcha, né? Haverá uma marcha, ponto de concentração é no espaço verde, Chapa, ok? A partir de Chapa de Bissau até Rotunda de Che Guevara. Então todos são convidados. Concentração é a partir das 16 horas. 7 da manhã? Ok. A concentração a partir das 7 da manhã e o início da marcha às 8 horas. Então a caravana sai de Chapa até Praça Che Guevara. Então todos estão convidados para tomarem parte neste grande evento, para podermos manifestar ao mundo que a Guiné-Bissau, assim como outros países em África, ainda não se entregaram ao imperialismo, ainda não se entregaram aos neocolonialistas, mas que a luta, como foi dito, a luta continua e que Guiné-Bissau e o PAGC ainda mantêm-se firme nessa gloriosa luta. Em seguida, vamos entregar os prêmios, porque todo ano que é organizada a comemoração do Dia de Libertação Africana, a organização MAI, que é Partido de Todos os Povos Africanos, que integra várias organizações, eles costumam escolher, ou seja, votar a entrega do prêmio para escolher as personalidades que têm lutado bastante para a implementação do pan-africanismo, para a libertação do povo africano. Então, hoje, vamos entregar dois. Eu vou pedir a Débora, né, para se aproximar. Aproxima. Então, nós temos este quadro, né, que é, como eu já disse antes, é um prêmio que é entregue a cada ano a algumas personalidades que têm lutado, que têm dedicado suas energias para lutar pela libertação africana. Eu vou pedir ao embaixador de Cuba, outra vez, para entregar o prêmio ao nosso saudoso e incansável camarada, presidente do partido, engenheiro Domingos Simões Pereira. Okay. Porque a Guiné-Bissau teve mais palmas. Mano, ok. Obrigado. É só para dizer que o nosso presidente do partido foi nós tivemos a sorte que as duas personalidades selecionadas na Guiné-Bissau são todos do PAGC. A organização de todos os povos africanos, como eu disse, é uma organização que congrega várias organizações a nível mundial. Foi feita uma votação, né, para selecionar a nível de África os camaradas, as pessoas que têm contribuído pela essa luta. Mas agora tivemos a sorte também de ter a nossa camarada incansável, combatente liberal de pátria, mas muito conhecido mesmo nessa organização. Eu me lembro, uma vez estivemos com os camaradas de Londres, perguntaram se nós conhecíamos a camarada Teodora. Não, na Guiné-Bissau parece que talvez muitos não têm essa informação, mas quando se fala de pan-africanismo, as organizações hoje, por exemplo, em Nigéria tem uma escola, Amílcar Cabral, uma escola de estudos ideológicos em Nigéria, assim como em Ghana. Então, dos nossos combatentes vivos hoje, a Mana Teodora é uma das que mais é falada em todas as palestras, organizações. Por isso, pedimos uma salva de palmas e queremos convidar o camarada Imani para entregar o prêmio a nossa camarada Mana Teodora. Um combatente de liberdade de pátria, um camarada incansável. Let's. Okay. Obrigado. Ok, obrigado, camarada Mana Teodora, é um privilégio. E todos nós estamos alegres porque é um reconhecimento internacional. Não se trata, nós apenas aqui estamos apenas a representar a organização internacional. Eu penso que todos nós devemos seguir este caminho, este exemplo que a Mana Teodora tem demonstrado, certo? Que lutar não depende da idade. Agora, em seguida, eu vou pedir a Ana para, a partir daqui, da Guiné-Bissau, queremos a Ana.
Greetings, Africans. Happy African Liberation Day. My name is Shukura Umi. Greetings, Africans. Happy And I am very happy and humbled to present today 2 awards on behalf of the Mawana Kayete Awards, Daughters of Africa. The first award goes to the National Union of Eritrean Women. And I want to give you a little background about this organization. The National Union of Eritrean Women, NUEW, was established in 1979 as one of the mass organizations of the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. In its current form, the NUEW is an autonomous, non-governmental organization dedicated to improving the status of Eritrean women. During Eritrea's liberation struggle, NUEW succeeded in organizing and encouraging women's participation in the war effort. Since independence in 1991, NUEW has continued to enhance the role of women by raising their political consciousness through literacy campaigns, credit programs, English language lessons, and other skills training. NUEW is administered by a headquarters office located in Asmara, as well as by regional offices located in 6 zones. Membership numbers over 200,000 women. Sources of income include monthly membership fees, grants, and projects, and fundraising activities by members. The mission of NUEW seeks to ensure that all Eritrean women confidently stand for their rights and equally participate in the political, economic, social, and cultural spheres of the country and share the benefits. This organization advocates for the following: the development of women's confidence in themselves and respect for one another, and the raising of consciousness to ensure their rights in the political and legal systems. A second piece of advocacy is they advocate for laws that protect women's rights in the family, entitlement rights, and other civil laws. A third advocate point: equal access to education and employment opportunities, equal pay for equal work, and equal rights to skills development to promotion, improved access to adequate health care, paid maternity leave, and childcare services. A fourth advocate point: the eradication of harmful traditional practices that endanger women's health and well-being. And a fifth, the reduction of poverty for Eritrean women and their families. The Eritrean women in government. In the national and regional assemblies, 30% of seats are reserved for women. Women compete against each other for the votes of both men and women. Women also run against men for the remaining 70% of seats. The NUEW played a major role during the drafting of the Eritrean Constitution by organizing workshops and synthesizing women on the crucial issues that concern women. This organization has played and continues to play a key role in advocating for, monitoring, and evaluating the formulation, planning, and implementation of government policies and programs from a gender perspective. Let's give a round of applause for the NUEW organization. Congratulations, congratulations. Thank you for all your hard work. The All African People's Revolutionary Party is honored to celebrate you, and we are so proud of you, and we thank you for the work you are doing, not just for Eritrean women, but for Africans everywhere. Thank you so much for the work you all are doing, and may you continue to work hard for Africans everywhere, especially African women. I will now take the honor and pleasure to give some background on our second awardee, Teodora Inacia Gomez of the PAIGC, who is also a recipient of the Mawana Kayati Daughters of Africa Award. This year, Teodora, has been deserving of this award based on her work and dedication to the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. She grew up in Guinea-Bissau under the systems of Portuguese colonialism, and in 1962, she joined the PAIGC and its women's wing, the UDEMU, and she worked closely with Amilcar and collaborated with him. The PAIGC believed that women had just as much rights as men. In Guinea-Bissau, the society was matrilineal, and so this helped to lead to the development of a strong women's wing inside of the PAIGC. She was militarily trained and commanded a unit of 95 women during the armed struggle against Portuguese colonialism. One of the women she fought alongside with was Titina Cilia, a matriarch hero of the anti-colonial struggle in Guinea-Bissau. In 1964, she received a scholarship and went to study in Ukraine. Also, she came back to Guinea-Conakry in 1966 to become a teacher at a school and became its director from 1969 to 1971. After Guinea-Bissau became independent in 1974, she became a member of the National People's Assembly representing the PAIGC. She helped to pass laws against female genitalia mutilation and other laws to help defend women's rights. In 1976, she was elected to represent the PAIGC as one of the 4 vice presidents in the Guinea-Bissau Soviet Union Friendship Association. Her work for the masses of African people is very extensive, but we especially want to mention the work she did with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, starting in 1998. We had her on our Cultural Workers Bureau campaign and did a recruitment drive across the United Snakes of America. Then she also helped to organize our Women's Wing Conference of Revolutionary Pan-African Parties in Guinea-Bissau in 2000. She has continued to work with our party as a member of the PAIGC and the Women's Wing UDEMU over the years. To this day, she continues to work to build the PAIGC and the AAPRP, AACPC, and the AAPRA. Please help me give a round of applause to our comrade and sister, Teodora, Inacia Gomez. Congratulations, comrade. Thank you so much for the work that you have done. And let's give another round of applause to both of our Mawana Kayate awardees. Thank you so much. And Viva la Revolución, join an organization working for justice. Amandala Awetu.
Thank you for that, Shakur. Greetings, Africans. Greetings, comrades. I hope all is well with everyone and their loved ones. My name is Fatai, and I have the wonderful honor of presenting to everybody here today the All African People's Revolutionary Party Legacy Award to none other than Comrade Ni Arde Oto. So here's a little bit about the All African People's Revolutionary Party Legacy Award. The AAPRP Legacy Award is given to our organizers who have given a lifetime in service to building the AAPRP and global Pan-Africanism struggles. We thank them for their past and continued selfless work and sacrifice. They are the true cadres who inspire us and generations to come. Now, here's a little bit about our comrade who will be receiving the award, about Comrade Ni Arde Oto. So Comrade Ni Arde Oto was born in Ghana. Comrade Ni Arde Oto has been a consistent member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party since 1996, when he was a student at the University of Akron in Ohio, United States of America. After leaving the University of Akron, he returned to Ghana and became the first member of the Ghana chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. He has been involved in organizing in many programs and events over the years, including African Liberation Day, the 50th anniversary of the Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, demonstrations against the bombings of Libya at the US Embassy, and many more programs and events. We wish to take out the time to thank Comrade Ni Ardo Oto for his lifetime of service to the African masses and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Forward, the African Revolution. Let us all join hands and praise Comrade Ni Arde Oto for all of their hard work. And we all strive and struggle to see a one unified socialist Africa.
Comrade, it's an honor to have you here on screen. Would you like to accept the award?
Revolutionary greetings and happy African Liberation Day for all the delegates and those who have gathered on this historic day. Comrades, I'm deeply honored and grateful to have been chosen for the African Liberation Day Legacy Award this year, May 2022.
I know many others equally deserve this award. I thank you all for choosing me. I would like to dedicate this award to my biological family in Ghana and the diaspora, my ideological family who are scattered throughout the world, and especially the women's wing of the AAPRP, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, who educated the male members on childcare, gender issues relating to women, and the triple oppression, race, sex, and class, which African women face daily. I salute all the comrades who we worked with for the struggle to achieve the goal of one unified socialist Africa, but have crossed over to join our revolutionary ancestors, the sheroes and the heroes whose shoulders we stand on. To our young members of the AAPRP, I want to tell you that the struggle we have engaged in is not a short distance race, but a marathon race of life. Until Africa is politically and economically united, the struggle still continues. With these words, with these few words, I humbly and graciously have accepted this noble award. Thank you again for the award. An onward march to one unified socialist Africa. That must be. Long live the AAPRP. Long live the AAURU. And long live all the revolutionary organizations and parties who are struggling to free themselves from imperialist domination. Forward ever and backwards never. Thank you.
drum call announces something important is getting ready to happen. Whenever we hold a ceremony, an important event, the drum call announces the time to begin has come.
We're here to honor our ancestors. Our ancestors are our people, our relatives, who have gone on, who have passed from this earth into another realm. Without our ancestors, we would not be where we are today. We are calling upon our ancestors who fought for us, who died for our freedom, who continue to fight on our behalf. We honor them and we thank them. All praises due to Almighty God and the honoring of our ancestors. As I salute our ancestors from the four corners of the universe. We honor our ancestors and we pour the water into the ground. It's a libation, giving honor and thanks to all our ancestors. And as you listen to us do the libations honoring our ancestors, you should quietly be still and call out the names of all your ancestors.
We pour libation Tambiko, and first we honor the Creator, the Most High, by the many names we know Him by, and we say Ashe, which means so be it.
Calling out our ancestors. Let's hear the names, and you should call out the names of your ancestors.
Kwame Ture,
Stephen Biko,
Winnie Mandela,
Marcus Garvey,
Mowina Soa,
Kwame Nkrumah,
Marie-Jeanne et la Moitié, Tatine Sela, Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah,
Ya Asantewaa,
Sekou Touré, Marcus Garvey, and the millions of women over thousands of years who have suffered oppression under patriarchal systems of human exploitation.
Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe.
We call out the names of the ancestors unknown, we say Ashe.
Ashe.
We call out the names of those that we don't remember, Ashe.
Ashe.
All our ancestors through the Middle Passage.
Ashe.
All those fortunate enough to be buried on the continent.
Ashe.
All those who await justice.
Ashe.
Those who are yet unborn.
Ashe.
That's it, the last one. Ashe.
Ashe.
As we gave thanks to our ancestors, thanks to all our ancestors, we say Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. Ashe. Ayibobo. Ayibobo. Ayibobo.
Hello, hello again, and happy African Liberation Day once more, everyone. As I said before, my name is Shukura Umi, and I am humbled and proud to facilitate our second panel for today. We are diving into Cuba, and more specifically, the world socialist movement and Pan-Africanism. We are privileged to have a few panelists with us today. So I'm going to take a moment to honor our panelists Chance as well as Ajamu. And if you all could both take maybe about 12 seconds to introduce yourselves and the organizations that you belong to, that would be stupendous. And then I'm going to start with our questions. So Chance, if you want to go first, please, and then Ajamu.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me on this wonderful panel and for being part of the African Liberation Day webinar that you guys are hosting. I'm so honored to be here. So my name is Chance Ahmed. I'm a Black Palestinian based in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm also an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. And so I'm very excited to be here today and be a panelist.
Thank you so much, Chance. We're really happy to have you. And Comrade Ajamu, if you can introduce yourself, please, and your organization.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Ajamu Baraka. I am the national organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace. The Black Alliance for Peace is a revolutionary organization committed to trying to revive the traditional Black anti-war and anti-imperialist tradition.
Thank you so much, panelists. I'm just so grateful and humbled that you all have joined us today. So I'm going to start off with a question for Chance. You said that you were a member of the Palestinian Youth Organization. Can you talk to us, Chance, about why you decided to join this organization and why you think being in an organization is important for Palestinian revolution?
Yeah, specifically for the Palestinian Youth Movement, we have understood that the role of youth, as well as the role of college students, have really played an integral component for those advocating for Palestinian liberation. In the 1960s, it was Palestinians in Cairo that would end up forming the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as well as the General Union of Palestinian Students were also integral prior to the 90s in organizing across the world for Palestine. So with that in mind, I think it's very integral that we as youth in the Palestinian Youth Movement take our position seriously, because we are the ones who are going to carry into the forefront, and we're the ones that really are going to shape this next era of Palestine, and we have the power to do that and control that destiny. So if you are a youth, I really think it's integral and important for you to be active, but also learn from the decisions of our elders and those that came before us, so that we can carry that legacy of liberation into the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chance. I identify as being a youth of the Young Pioneers Institute with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So I definitely feel you and where you're coming from. And I appreciate your response. So Comrade Ajamu, I do want to ask you the same question, but I'm going to ask you if you can add on to that answer to this basic question that I wanted to put in. I want to hear from you and ask, how can national liberations and socialist organizations, whether they have Africans or be mixed with other people, fight against neo-colonialism and aiding in the African struggle against neo-colonialism? And I can repeat that if you'd like.
I have it. Thank you so much. I think that the first thing that has to happen is a recognition of common interests. That for African people, we understand how we in fact became African people as a consequence of the invasion of the Americas, the enslavement of our people, the production of enormous amounts of value that created what we see today and what they refer to as Western Europe and so-called Western civilization. All other colonized peoples who have had similar experiences and who recognize that we're not going to be able to realize peace, development, or societal transformation until we take back power from these European criminals. So we recognize our common interests, and we then recognize, in order for us to realize our common interests in terms of our targeting of the source of our issues, of our suffering, then we can then move toward what we need to do to, in fact, to realize those common interests. And so we know the only way we're going to take back power, the only way we're going to be able to transform ourselves and our conditions is when we get into organizations, when we build powerful coalitions that concentrate our power, and when we commit ourselves to a unswerving, undying fight to the end, understanding that not only do we have our liberation at heart, at the center of our struggles, but the liberation of all those who are in fact suffering under the heels of this common enemy of collective humanity.
Thank you so much, comrade. I feel like my head is going to fall off my neck because I'm just nodding and I'm agreeing with you 100%. And I thank you for giving us a two-part, right? So you answered the first question that I asked, and then you also tied into why being in an organization is important. We're constantly trying to remind people everywhere who are oppressed, joining some organization that is working for justice is really going to help all of us in terms of everyone getting their land back, whether it's indigenous people, Palestinians, whether it's Africans. So thank you so much. So I'm just going to continue on. And so Chance, this next question is for you. What is the link between neo-colonialism and some of the reactionary nationalist movements attempting to solve the problems from it? And I'll ask that one more time. What is the link between neo-colonialism and some of the reactionary nationalist movements attempting to solve the problems from it?
Okay, so I think that the biggest link that we see right now is whether states, especially these reactionary states, so specifically, I'm going to talk about states like Saudi Arabia, states like the UAE, Morocco, for example, that are authoritarian in nature. And what they are attempting to do is consolidate their own power over region, over people and their own interests. And they believe that by doing that and aligning with the West, so specifically, countries like the UK, also countries like America, that these will preserve their own material interests in their countries. So this allows them to consolidate their own wealth, their own power, and also it allows them to enjoy a relatively quote unquote peaceful life, because they are the ones that are outsourcing the oppression, and they are the ones that are, we won't say on top, but they are in the good graces of those Western imperial forces. So by doing this, they are allowed to maintain a system of privilege that allows them certain benefits. And so really, they understand that without the US and without Western powers, they have no power, because their people that they are repressing, whether it is in the UAE, whether it's in these reactionary states, are not with them. They are not allies of the people. So with that in mind, they must really hold on to their power and consolidate it. Otherwise, their people will go against them, because we have an understanding that as Palestinians, most people are aligned with our cause and for national liberation. But what's important is that these states, we need to push the people in these states to have a change, so that those consolidating power can also have their own revolution against these oppressive regimes.
Thank you so much, Chance. I had another question in mind, but you already answered it about just why is it important for us to join forces? And I think you were just speaking to how these oppressive regimes are trying to tackle every single one of us, and to also make sure that we don't have access to our land, which equals power. So I thank you so much for that. So, Comrade Ajamu, I wanted to ask you, okay, so how does the U.S. intentionally work to sow divisions between colonized communities, and how can we overcome that in our fight towards Pan-Africanism?
Well, I think what the colonizer does quite effectively is to, and Chance touched on this, to identify elements of the colonized peoples that they then will shower with privileges, all kinds of material wealth, and make them, and they also voluntarily do this themselves, but they become agents of colonialism. And not only do they become agents in the sense of they will exploit and oppress their own peoples, but they will help to disseminate ideals that justify those relationships, that hierarchical relationship, and justifies their collaboration with the enemies of humanity. So they play a very important role in confusing the masses of our people. So what we have to do is, in fact, to engage in a politics that, while we recognize the commonality of various colonized people, we also have to recognize that within those colonized people are class collaborators. And so our targeting and our struggle against these class collaborators has to be absolute. It has to be unapologetic, because that's the only way we're going to be able to defeat this enemy. That we have an internal struggle and we have the external struggle. Both are connected by the fact that we are struggling against one system, one colonial capitalist system. So that is how we attempt on the ideological plane to counter that. But again, material force can only be overthrown by material force. So we have to organize ourselves. We have to build transnational revolutionary structures, both in terms of how we continue to build a revolutionary Pan-African movement, but also how we build relationships between that revolutionary Pan-African movement and other revolutionary peoples on this planet. We are in the majority. We are on the right side of history. The only thing that's holding us back right now is our lack of political clarity and our level of organization. And that's why these kinds of events, this African Liberation Day, and I want to salute the consistency and the leadership of the All African People's Revolutionary Party for keeping this front and center, for giving us an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations and to revitalize or to rejuvenate ourselves, if you will, as we engage in the struggle, as we are reminded of all of our common allies, as we are exposed to people like our brother Chance, who's involved in the same struggle against a common enemy. These are the kinds of relationships we have to be made aware of. Our people have to be made aware of as we build this global revolutionary movement.
That's right, Comrade Ajamu. Absolutely, I agree 9,000%. And that's what I've been trying to tell folks, is that this is the beauty of of African Liberation Day, is it allows us to be exposed to different groups that are oppressed, and then we get to hear from them and hear their stories and see how more aligned we are than separate. So thank you for that. So you all have been outstanding, and I'm so grateful that you have chose to share your time with us today. I do need to pass it on to my comrade, but I think we can squeeze in time for one more question from both of you. So I'm actually going to go to Comrade Ajamu first, Chance, and then you'll wrap it up for us, if that's okay. So Comrade Ajamu, if you could just briefly, please, just talk to us about AFRICOM USA and the military command, And then I'll pass it to Chance with my last question. Thank you both for your time.
And thank you for your wonderful moderation and this opportunity to mention very briefly one of the structures we have to struggle against, which is this U.S. Africa Command, or referred to as AFRICOM. This is one of the structures of white power, of white supremacy, that the U.S. is using to try to maintain its control, its ability to exploit our people as the cutting edge of collective imperialism under the hegemony of the U.S. The U.S. Africa Command is the command structure for the African continent. It is the structure that they use to train African armies, to identify African collaborators, to corrupt African leaders that will allow for AFRICOM to participate in their territories, to establish U.S. bases, to engage in activity that results in destabilization, that results in increase in violence. They will, working with their CIA, they will create situations on the ground in Africa that then will compel some African leaders to invite AFRICOM in to help them fight against jihadists or whatever. All of this is geared toward deepening the U.S. involvement on the African continent. We have a project right now at the Black Alliance of Peace. The Shutdown AFRICOM campaign is part of our campaign in support of the struggles, the liberation struggles on the African continent, helping to identify those structures that we need to struggle against, and to in fact struggle against those structures. So AFRICOM, everybody needs to be aware of this, and they need to figure out how they can help us to raise the awareness among our people throughout the African world of this structure, and to encourage our people to help us to target and in fact to destroy this, which means again targeting the neo-colonial puppets that collaborate with this imperialist structure.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you so much, Comrade Ajamu. Okay, Chance, how can Palestinians confront neo-colonialism? Can you give us some examples of how you all are working to address neo-colonialism, please?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think one of the ways that we can confront neo-colonialism is by tackling issues such as increased securitization, issues such as surveillance, as well as understanding that we are still engaged in an anti-colonial struggle as well. So when we look at securitization and surveillance, what we really see, especially in the United States, is seeing that Israel, as the Zionist entity, will use a lot of these colonial tactics and then export them all over the world, not just in the United States, but for all these authoritarian and oppressive governments that we see. So by tackling this, the Zionist entity's use of neocolonialism, it establishes an opening for a united front for all of us to tackle our colonizer and our common oppressor. Because Zionism is not just a threat to Palestinians, but it is a threat to all of those around the world, as an issue of white supremacy, as an issue of colonialism, as imperialism, because it affects all of our communities. And so when we look at surveillance, we see that, especially in California, there was a whole campaign dedicated to stopping Urban Shield, where Israeli officials would come in and train not just US law enforcement, but they would also train law enforcement from around the world. So exporting these colonial tactics. So by tackling issues such as this, by stopping the deadly exchange, which is the
police and law enforcement programs specifically within the United States and Israel that exchange by tackling issues such as that, by calling out the New York Police Department, which has its own branch in Israel, we could tackle these issues of neocolonialism and move forward and strike a blow to our oppressors. And this is what we need to do. We need to highlight these commonalities and move forward, because this is what is going to bridge the gap between the Palestinian struggle and also the Pan-African struggle. Because we have to understand that if our colonizers and these imperialist forces are in solidarity and with each other, we need to be in joint struggle with each other against them. And so if we are to achieve liberation, we need a united front to tackle that. And so, as my comrade just said, there's more of us, but we need to do that. We need to do that education, and we need to do that organizing around that, so we could hopefully in the near future be victorious and see a liberated world for all of our peoples.
You all have done an outstanding job. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so grateful for your time today, and we hope to see you next year at ALD 2023. Thank you all again so much, and forward, may the revolution continue. Thank you all so much for your time. And so now I have the pleasure and privilege of passing the mic to my comrade Salifu, who is going to introduce two presentations on behalf of the Pan-African Congress of Azania and the Azanian People's Organization. Salifu, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Shakura. Thank you so much. Greetings, Africans, greetings, comrades, greetings, collaborators. I'm very excited about today's African Liberation Day symposium. Very excited that you all are here. My name is Salifu, and I am humbled to introduce our keynote presenters for African Liberation Day 2022. So we are about to hear from none other than our comrades of the Pan-African Congress of Azania, PAC, and the Azanian People's Organization, AZAPO. This is a very special keynote because, as many of you know, in February, these two organizations, which have historically been so important to our people's liberation struggle, came together to craft a declaration of cooperation agreement, which cements their intent to forge cooperation and pulling together of expertise with a view to advancing the revolution for the attainment of one Azania nation. The PAC and AZAPO are current day examples of principled African unity in practice, and I could not be more excited to introduce them today. We will hear from Jackie Saroke, lifelong cadre of the PAC, as well as the president of AZAPO, Nelvis Kekima. So without further ado, our keynote presenters for the day, PAC and AZAPO.
One, isolate. I'm the secretary for publicity and information in the National Executive Committee of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. We in the PAC adopted Pan-Africanism as a guiding philosophy of our organization. And in doing so, the founders of the organization were inspired by the worldwide movement, particularly the leadership of Pan-Africanism as represented by the ideas of the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. The PAC in the 50s broke from the mainstream of politics in South Africa as explained and understood by the old guard in the Congress movement. The old guard accepted that South Africa was exceptional from the rest of the continent. The Africanist, a grouping that adopted African nationalism as a guiding philosophy, felt that this meant the organization was not in line with the conditions of black people throughout the world. And black people were their own liberators. And the same applies to the confines of racist South Africa. These debates created a lot of problems, but in some, the Africanists who later formed the PAC were saying that South Africa is an African country, and it is the African people who must be the core of the formation of a free nation, and that the African people were their own liberators, and that as people who have an emotional commitment to total liberation should understand that they have nothing to lose if they take up the leadership themselves rather than being assisted by others. And that the African individual had to rid himself or herself of colonial mentality. And that the new nation will be primarily be from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar. The new nation will be a nation of African people throughout the world without any restrictions of the borders. So these differences created a problem in the country to such an extent that the PAC believes that those who were pursuing the Freedom Charter dictates had missed it altogether. Their concept was that South Africa would have four nations: the whites, Indians, coloreds, and the indigenous people who are Africans in their terms. We did not agree with that because our concept of Pan-Africanism is against tribalism, against colonialism, against imperialism, and that we will define ourselves properly. But to cut the story short, we have come to a position where South Africa has nominal freedom, and that nominal freedom was hailed by the international community. But that nominal freedom had within it serious setbacks for the true freedom of the African people. So we see that the settler colonialism, its entirety, has been protected through a legal system that is now defined as a constitutional democracy. I personally was at the CODESA talks, and I was held to detention under Section 29 of the Internal Security Act because to express yourself at that time and talk about the land and talk about the new nation at that negotiating table meant that we were then described and isolated or described as militant and radicals who wanted to topple and overthrow the government without following legal means. With other members of the PAC, we were detained at John Foster Square, and we were facing possible treason charges. But because we were participating, the PAC took a strategy to participate in the talks, because we could not have a convention that discusses the future of our country without isolating ourselves. we also took a position that fighting must continue. So the PAC took a position that our armed struggle was also an important feature of our struggle, and that we will use every side, including the negotiations themselves, as a side of struggle, as a side where we would be able to highlight our issues. But the forces were greater than what we thought, because first, a patriotic united front, which was supported by the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, and the Liberation Committee, which was intended to be led by the PAC and the ANC, it collapsed. It collapsed because we did not agree with the ANC on their approach to negotiations. They had discussions with the National Party, the settler regime at the time, and make deals behind closed doors. And we said we wanted transparent and open agreement. That on its own created a problem. We think we also were not very strategic in withdrawing from the Patriotic Front, but that Patriotic Front collapsed. Today we are focused on Africa Liberation Day, because just to say it's Africa Month, just to say it is a remembrance of the day when the OAU was launched in 1963 is not enough. The OAU was itself a compromise between, as it's popularly known, the grouping that were known as the Casablanca group, where the Osagyefo and others were, and a group, and the other groupings generally referred to as the Monrovia group, who were adamant that whilst unity is important, the colonial borders must be kept, and that the various states in Africa must be standalone organizations and so on. This was obviously Pan-Africanism created hostility with imperialism, and imperialism in return created problems and fought against Pan-Africanism. That's where we come from. We have been suppressed. Our leaders have been put in jail. We have been harassed as a Pan-Africanist revolutionary movement. We have tried to come up over the years in different forms. We have associated with the Black Consciousness movement as it rose, led by Steve Biko and others. Because I mean the differences between the two organizations are not that great. Even though we have two standalone groups, we created a working relationship with cadres of the Black Consciousness movement. I myself come from the generation of 1976, which was groomed by Black Consciousness. So we understand very well that Pan-Africanism and Black Consciousness can cooperate. In the current leadership of the PAC, I serve in the tripartite cooperation between ASAPO and Black Consciousness organization and the PAC. The PAC's definition of a united front of patriots is that we should focus on minimum issues that make us unite. And the minimum requirement on those issues are that we agree that South Africa, as people know it today, is a sham. It's a false liberation. It's a false freedom. Yes, there are basic freedoms of movement, freedom of speech, of association, and so on. But the core problem of white domination, the core problem of capitalist exploitation, the core problem of imperialist manipulation still remains. And these three evil forces must be fought with and destroyed, because they create a stunting of people not to develop into full human beings. I want to make and refer to two examples for purposes of today's Africa liberation discussions. The one is that white supremacists have taken a disguise and operate among us behind the scenes and are forever dominant without being in political office. This creates an element of neo-colonialism, but settler colonialism itself is really complex and needs to be clearly defined as we go forward. So the first example about white supremacists is that whilst racism is not in the statute books, the racist system still exists. The racist system still is a system that retains power of resources. And it also exists in society because with colonial mentality, people still believe that without whites running the country, it will all be difficult for proper government of a liberated society to run smoothly. This belief is, in simple terms, slave mentality, colonial mentality. The majority of our people still believe in that. That is why instead of responding to issues that matter most, people respond to things to other Africans who are driven by economic conditions in Southern Africa, to come to South Africa, to come here in the country, and anger is spewed out against those people who come here, because South Africans or African people here, out of colonial mentality, do not want to identify with the rest of the continent. They do not want to identify with Africans throughout the world. They'd rather have the white man dominating them. The power and resources that white supremacists have is that they use confidence tricks. As confidence tricksters, they had one of the major characters in the liberation movement to agree to a settlement where the basic resources, material resources like the land, were never discussed. And a draft constitution was made that protected the land through the Section 29, which is the property clause, that those who have property cannot be removed from them without following legal processes. Even land that lies fallow and is not used has not been returned to the people, because out of desperation and hurrying up to seats of power in parliament, we have found that, and it's proven that it's a sham government that has no clue how a state operates. And it's easy for elements such as corruption, moral corruption of those in power to seep in and to get destroyed. So this has on the whole led to people not believing in an approach where African people can liberate themselves. So we need a second national liberation program to deal with that. So white supremacy is seen not only through issues of the land, that what the economy is in the hands of whites. They are the ones who have developed, as a people, who have developed from the policies of the country, from the time when 1994 happened. No longer sanctions, they can continue to operate in the world as they can. Their ill-gotten wealth has benefited them more. So that is why South Africa is referred to as the most unequal society, because the reality is staring us in the face. Now, how do we move forward as Africanists in doing this? The PAC suffered a lot of internal problems. We are not afraid to discuss our internal issues out in the open. But those internal issues are mostly problems of a reactionary environment. Revolutionaries have to look beyond the dust that is immediate before them and approach issues like Sobuke had advised us on an international level. And an international level for us is to adopt revolutionary Pan-Africanism, to see ourselves as part of a wider movement. Africa Liberation Day offers us an opportunity to re-examine the political environment and link us with the broader movement internationally of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, where we speak the same language. We speak and have identified the same problems that we have to go through, where we have the same vision and we have, in a manner of speaking, the same goals of total liberation of the African people. In the same way that Ghana under Osaki Hefo Kwame Nkrumah said, without African unity, Ghana's freedom is meaningless. We have to go out of our cocoons, out of our myopic approach, and have a broader international. In the PAC, this is the politics that we have inherited. We sometimes get out of that, but we need Pan-Africanists to do that. The PAC took a lot of inspirations from W.E.B. Du Bois and others who went to Ghana to promote Pan-Africanism. In the PAC, we have had leaders in the PAC themselves as a liberation movement, inspiring other countries and other liberation movements in other areas to work together. So we've seen how that unity has been a greater enemy to the dark forces. So we're not naive. The movement for African liberation is a powerful movement, but it is here to stay. Our immediate concern is to deal with settler colonialism in Southern Africa. Our immediate concern is to work with the Tanzanian masses in a unity with the people, a unity that also allows us to bring them to the fore with Pan-Africanist ideas, so that we isolate the reactionaries, so that we are able to create an environment that would allow us to work in Southern Africa with other countries who are facing similar problems of continued settler colonialism, like in Namibia, for instance, and in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, in Southern Africa. There are many countries that have had these many difficulties. For us, Africa Liberation Day is a continuation of the struggle. A luta continua. Isolate.
Greetings to the All African People's Revolutionary Party leadership and fellow panelists, and of course, brothers and sisters, let me state the obvious and say that in Azania, we have gone through 3 stages of colonialism. They are classical colonialism, settler colonialism, and neo-colonialism. Azania is by no means different from our Africa in terms of this political experience. However, you could say that it is not that difficult to wage a struggle against both the classical and settler forms of colonialism, because the enemy is distinct, visible, and isolated from the people. The problem arises with the anti-colonial struggle that is anchored on a narrow nationalism that makes no reference to the land reposition, total liberation, and socialism. If by any chance socialism is mentioned, it is only for the sole purposes of sloganeering. In Africa, it is the native bourgeoisie that usually leads those anti-colonial but bourgeois struggles. Frantz Fanon cautions us about the true political intentions of this national middle class, which, open quote, constantly demands the nationalization of the economy and of the trading sectors, close quote. This political elite does not have in mind the socialization of the means of wealth creation in a manner that the wealth so created would be equally distributed to the people, to eradicate poverty and develop both the country and the people. Says Fanon, open quote, to them, nationalization quite simply means the transfer into native hands of those unfair advantages which are a legacy of the colonial period, close quote. That is the reason why in South Africa, our Azania, we had billions of rand thrown into the so-called Zondo Commission to investigate corruption and state capture by the political elites hiding in the erstwhile liberation parties. When crime is committed by the ordinary people, the police investigate and simply arrest the culprits to face trial in a court of law. The process changes when the culprits are the ruling elites. Tedious parliamentary processes kick in and lead to the expensive establishment of some commissions of inquiry, which in turn must submit their findings to the very same ruling elites for the determination of action to be taken. Not much ever comes out of such processes. In Azania, classical colonialism metamorphosed into settler colonialism after the colonial powers slaughtered each other in that so-called Anglo-Boer War and agreed to hand over power to their people settled in Azania to misrule our country. Azanians waged a number of land wars under the various leaders within the context of the institution of indigenous leadership. The modern struggles were advanced under the liberation movement, which included the ANC, PAC, and AZAPO, the Azanian People's Organization. Such modern anti-colonial struggles led us to the ushering in of independence and democracy in 1994. AZAPO asserts that such 1994 independence was in fact the point at which settler colonialism mutated into neo-colonialism. All settler colonialism has done was to take cover and hide behind the erstwhile liberation parties and their popular leaders. The wealth and the means to create that wealth remains firmly in the hands of settler colonialists or white people. In other words, it is political independence with no land. It is democracy with no development. It is political power with no economic emancipation. It is freedom with no liberation. Neo-colonialism is, in a sense, an enemyless phase of struggle because the enemy is invisible and hiding behind the native middle class, which is now managing the country and the economy on behalf of settler colonialism or white monopoly capital. When the people are frustrated and angry, they march to the authorities to hand over their memorandum of demands. But they soon realize that they are angrily singing about the dead Bothas, Malans, and Declerks of the settler colonialism, while handing the memorandum to their popular leaders with whom they embrace and take selfies and go home and forget. With that said, let me hasten to stress the point that Tanzania is by no means different from the African continent, of which it is the integral part. You have to take into cognizance that the productive formations like capitalism and structures like modern nation states were invariably imposed upon Africa through colonialism, racism, and slavery. That is why we should never overemphasize our colonial heritage of nation states over the oneness of the African people in Africa. Be that as it might, the struggle to dismantle neo-colonialism stretches from when Africa realized that coloniality, as negatively effective as it was, had not been conclusive. In fact, this realization made our forebears aware that there remained pockets of African wisdom that could be used to continue our struggle against colonialism. This point is made here deliberately to underscore two things. First, to illustrate the claim that colonialism has not been conclusive. This we see in the fact that Africans who retained their languages are aware of the resilience of African spirituality, which sustained our forebears and retained knowledge of African medicinal plants and shrubs that gave vitality to our forebears. Second, neo-colonialism as a facade of classical colonialism can only thrive when there is a lack of the historicity of the African. Accordingly, the conversation that contributes to pushing back the intrusion of colonialism in capturing the African must be pivoted on a conversation that remembers the greatness of Africa and her great people. This remembrance should not be reduced and frozen into a past of pillage, maiming, and the exploitation of Africa and her people. Therefore, we say boldly as a ZACO that colonialism must be dismantled. The story of the tale of the African cannot and must not be reduced to slavery, because we have not always been enslaved as an African people. I find courage in the words of the African scholar Kofi Asare Opo when he says the following about our forebears. Open quotes. For many centuries, our ancestors lived here on this continent, grounded in the knowledge and understanding of themselves as a people and of the world in which they lived. Without this knowledge, they could not have survived as a people who created their own unique societies, civilizations, and cultures, established states, kingdoms, and empires, and came up with their own reflections and insights into the problems of the meaning of life and death. This knowledge was not limited to physical things or their natural environment. It also had to do with these spiritual realities. And above all, they created languages that served as vehicles for the communication of this knowledge and its transmission from generation to generation. But besides language, other means of transmitting this body of knowledge were devised, including symbols, artifacts, songs, stories, festivals, rituals, and a whole host of other means. Over time, this knowledge became the common intellectual property of our societies until their encounter with other forms of knowledge, which in our day threatens to overshadow the indigenous knowledge of our forebears with our own eager complicity. Close quote. This point is made to buttress the fact that Africans have not always been enslaved. Our history should therefore not begin and end with slavery. This is the starting point that will position us to challenge all attempts to disavow our own cultures. Once that is done, we will be on our way to dismantling colonialism with a liberated mind. Furthermore, this admission might discourage us from the eagerness to show our scars to the world, hoping that they will express pity on us. If anything, Africa must positively use her scars to remind herself that she is not where she should be in the development of world history. The scars must be used to rally our warriors into their regiments and fight for the restoration of the humanity and dignity of the African. The scars must be used to liberate and heal the African land by returning it to its rightful owners, the Africans. A liberated Africa and restored military might will definitely be of benefit even to the African in the diaspora. The restoration of the might of the motherland will make everyone think twice before they could once again treat an African as their slave. Africa has enough wealth, both spiritually and materially, and thus Africa abhors the begging bowl mentality that seems to have characterized this great continent under the sterile leadership of the native middle class, which derailed the anti-colonial struggle and plundered the resources of the continent for the enduring benefit of their colonial masters. Of course, the native managerial class does get some crumbs thrown into their mouths by their colonial masters for helping to arrest the development of the African people. As we commemorate this African Day, we must also take a moment to agree to have a covenant with Africa as Africans. A covenant in contractual language denotes an agreement to place the other in confidence and to see to it that what is agreed between parties gets to be realized. It also means allowing space for partners to be critical and self-critical about the issues that hinder our collective growth. That covenant is a vow by the African masses to forge solidarity with the fellow Africans beyond the narrow confines of their nation states. This covenant is a struggle from below by the African masses under the banner of Pan-Africanism. If colonialism is showing its ugly face as imperialism under transnational bodies like the United Nations, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, European Union, NATO, and others, we therefore know that no one country in Africa can fight colonialism in isolation. We also know that the anti-colonial struggle must be freed from the leadership of the African states and be placed in the hands of the fighting African masses. Azapo has no reason whatsoever to look beyond the All Africa People's Revolutionary Party for the leadership and direction of the struggle for land repossession, total liberation, and socialism by the African masses of the continent of our beautiful Africa. It is that Pan-African anti-colonial struggle that will push narrow reactionary nationalism and patriotism to the background. The momentum of the struggle will undermine and crush some Afrophobic tendencies underpinned by reactionary patriotism that we have seen in South Africa, our Azani. It is for a reason that Azapo never ever uses misleading terms like post-colonial. We are not in a post-colonial, but we are in a colonial, neo-colonial state in Tanzania. You cannot be in a neo-colonial state and still claim to be liberated. Amilcar Cabral has been very kind to us by offering a sound description of what national liberation is. Open quote, national liberation takes place when, and only when, national productive forces are completely free of all kinds of foreign domination. The liberation of productive forces and consequently of the ability to determine the mode of production most appropriate to the evolution of the liberation of the liberated people necessarily opens up new prospects for the cultural development of the society in question by returning to that society all its capacity to create progress. Close quote. Comrades, sisters, and brothers, we must understand that colonialism is so versatile and enduring that it is able to survive well beyond the strict limits of colonial administrations. That is exactly why coloniality survives colonialism. In that sense, coloniality may be kept alive in books, in the criteria for academic performance, in cultural patterns, in common sense, in the self-image of peoples, in aspirations of the self, and so many other aspects of our modern experience. And so, as we commemorate the Africa Liberation Day, as Zappo says, we are ready for the revolution. Thank you.
Incredible, incredible. I hope y'all are on fire the way I am after those two keynote presentations. And with that said, I'm going to pass us over to the next portion of our African Liberation Day symposium and pass it along to my comrade Evelyn.
Greetings, peace and revolutionary greetings, Africans. It is my pleasure and honor to facilitate this panel on the role of women fighting for unity against neo-colonialism. I'm working with the Tory Tribe Work Study Circle of the AAPRP, and this is I'm about a year and a half into that circle and work with the AAPRP. And I really do feel like, this has been a transforming experience and an organization that really recognizes the role and importance of women, and also one that recognizes the work that still needs to be done. And I can really appreciate that about the AAPRP. In the words of our beloved Thomas Sankara, the revolution and women's liberation go together. We do not talk of women's emancipation as an act of charity or out of a surge of human compassion. It is a basic necessity for the revolution to triumph. Women hold up the other half of the sky. These are the words of Thomas Sankara in the book, We Are the Heirs of Revolution. And as our panelists will express much better than I in just a few moments, the role of women in liberation is essential, as is the role of all people and all figures, all Africans. And so it's not enough, as his quote said, it's not enough to try to accommodate or make a little space for women. They have to be involved in the movement and in the work from the very beginning, integrated in the work from the very beginning. And there's just no way, for us to reach liberation without that factor and without being cognizant of that. And we really have to, hear from women and let women lead, as we look at, these new iterations of colonialism, neo-colonialism, and we think about the ways that imperialism is expanding and the unique and particular ways that women and marginalized genders are directly impacted in so many different ways, from our physicality, to the work that we're subjected to, or the work that we are able to do voluntarily, and in a number of other ways. And so it's absolutely central that we always have space to hear from women and always make room and let it be a natural thing, actually, for women to lead in the work. On that note, we are going to move to our first panelists. And first, we'll talk a little bit about the organization that our city is coming from. Mbellico is a women's organization. It is a formation of the Azanian People's Organization, AZAPO. It was established in 1987 for the purpose of addressing the unique struggles of the Azanian women. AZAPO recognized that women have unique problems and thus formed a wing that concentrated on women's affairs. Mbellico runs self-help projects such as bricklaying, carpentry, and upholstery. There are various health projects and education projects that have been established by the organization, and a bursary fund that has been established to assist students. It is an organization that locates the struggle of Black women's liberation within the historical struggle of Black people. Embeleco is guided by, among others, the principles of anti-capitalism, anti-colonialism, anti-neo-colonialism, and anti-patriarchy. Embeleco understands that the liberation of Black people cannot be complete without the liberation of Black women. And on that note, I'd like to welcome and hear from Comrade Sikizwa Dabula.
Thank you to the All African People's Revolutionary Party for hosting this important conversation. And thank you for extending an invite to Embeleco Women's Organization, a women's formation of the Azanian People's Organization, AZAPO. I bring you revolutionary greetings from an organization whose leaders and members refuse to sell the struggle for temporal material gains. I greet you in the names of fallen activists whose blood serves as an ultimate sacrifice for the liberation of Azania. I greet you in the names of fellow Black brothers and sisters who lie as cornerstones beneath the buildings of European invaders. I greet you in the silent cries of women whose children are sold and trafficked as modern-day slaves. I also greet you with a hopeful smile that Azania shall once again be ours. The marking of this 59th anniversary of the African Liberation Day takes place at a very tumultuous time in our country, where fellow Africans are at war with each other, hurting and even killing one another for mere scraps provided by descendants of colonial settlers and foreign capitalists who remain in control of our means of production. A time when the maiming and killing of young women and children is now perpetrated by Black men. This is the kind of violence and intolerance against one another that has us sitting here today in an attempt to call for a healing of the overexploited African. It is our hope that the healing will unify Africans towards the fight against this inherently anti-Black neo-colonial system. This commemorative event is a painful reminder of the severe impact of our land dispossession and the spiritual castration of Black people. What is Africa Liberation Day to me as a landless young Black woman with no economic power to self-determine? What is liberating about living in fear? Fear of your own people. Today, we raise clenched fists in solidarity with one another and loudly chant, Amandla. But tomorrow, the same fist may be thrown at me for refusing to bow to the patriarchal forces that challenge my existence as a woman. My reality is immersed in the violence arising from the powerlessness of my Black people. This is the violence that threatens our collective progress as a people. This month of May also marks the anniversary of the formal adoption of the 1996 Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. This is the same constitution that is praised the world over for its progressiveness and advancement. One really wonders how progress is measured if the people this constitution purports to represent are landless and impoverished. In fact, it is this very same constitution that is used to perpetuate the landlessness of the majority of the citizens of this country. The European invaders made the point of ensuring that this country is governed through a constitutional democracy that favors white liberalism at the expense of Black people. In attempting to speak to the role of women against neocolonialism, allow me to borrow from the wise words of the revolutionary leader and president of Burkina Faso, the late Comrade Thomas Sankara, when he says, "The revolution and women's liberation go together. We do not talk of women's emancipation as an act of charity or because of a surge of human compassion. It is a basic necessity for the triumph of the revolution. Women hold up the other half of the sky." Sankara's counsel should be understood in the context of finding who the Black woman is in the struggle matrix and how important she is in the united fight against neocolonialism, and the fight for the true liberation of our land and all that belongs to her. History is littered with stories of triumphalism by many a woman warrior. Our African way of life teaches us that women are sacred ancestral beings who ought to be revered as gods. They are the portals through which life is given. Not only do they birth and nurture people to humanity, but they also defend them against any harm. But most importantly, they set and determine the trajectory of the futures of their nations. It was Nkrumah, when talking about the successes of their struggle in Ghana, who told us, I quote, "From the beginning, women have been the chief field organizers," close quote. We also know of brave women warriors like Mkabayi Kachama, Ya Asentewa, Mbuyane Anda, and Queen Nzinga, who all have been very instrumental in the fight against the invasion of their nations by the European colonialists. These warriors represent the uncontaminated character and might of Black women in Africa. These are the warriors who remind us that no revolution may be successful without the participation of women. It is from understanding the importance of women in society that one is forced to suggest that the economic exploitation of Black women in this country and their exclusion and participation in decision-making is not only myopic, but remains a grave injustice. In dismantling neo-colonialism, the first war that we Black women must wage is against accepting the concept of negative reality that makes Black women view themselves as inferior victims who can neither care for nor defend themselves against any form of attack, be it personal or societal. This attempt by the system to create in every Black woman a helpless, powerless being must be rejected with the disgust it deserves. The second, perhaps most important fight should be rejecting any divisive strategy meant to drive a wedge between the Black woman and the Black man, as if both are not victims of imperialism, racism, and neo-colonialism. Our temporary material conditions are created such that the two remain at odds with each other when they are supposed to be united in the fight against the system of oppression. If we Black people contribute knowingly and unknowingly in the persistence of this antagonistic relationship, then we must accept the inevitable death of the Black race. Third, we must refuse to allow the system to insinuate Black women in the struggles of those who are on the side of the oppressor. Having noted the ease with which neo-colonialism as a continuum of colonialism mutates and shapeshifts, it can be understandable why Black women find resonance in certain philosophical constructs that are invented to safeguard the efforts of white women in positioning themselves for power. However well-meaning white women may be, they will never return to us our stolen land. However well-meaning white women may be, they will never settle for anything less than being a boss to Black women. They will never be part of the healing and restoration of the Black family, and they will never sacrifice the luxuries of their comfortable positions in the pyramid of white power. We must remember that our fundamental struggle as Black people in this overly exploited settler colony is for the return of our land to its rightful owners. We need the convergence of the forces of our Black women and Black men to overcome this struggle, if not for ourselves, then for future generations of the Black race. It is only through this convergence of our united forces as a Black race that neo-colonialism can be dismantled. Our unity must, without fear or doubt, silence the arrogance of this mutating, multifaceted anti-Black system. By going back in history to find the unadulterated Black woman and Black man, and using that as a basis upon which a new liberated being is created, we shall have succeeded in wiping away any trace of the self-mutilating African the colonialists would have created. Tamaku.
Wow, comrade. Wow, that was such a powerful speech. That was just, that was amazing. I'm still kind of processing everything that Sister Sikizwe just said. You know, she was mentioning so many vital points for us to be mindful of. And if I could just, you know, recall a couple of the key points that our comrade made, you know, she mentioned the means of production and the way that labor and work exploits Black women in particular. And we know that in, you know, the United States, that Black women in particular make less pay than anyone else and are subjected to harsh work conditions and things like that when they're engaged in low wage labor. And so I really appreciate that point that was made by our comrade. And then also, you know, being mindful of the fact that the experiences of African women across the diaspora are different. They vary. You know, some African women have various types of privileges, maybe based on their education or their social position, and some may be more disadvantaged. Some are subjected to violence and sexual abuse all the time. And some may even be attacked for speaking out in the way that our comrade just did. So I really appreciate all of those brilliant points that you made, Sidi. Thank you very, very much. We are now going to move to our next speaker, who is hailing from a union that I am glad to be a part of as well, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. And so let me tell you a little bit about the AAWRU. The All African Women's Revolutionary Union was founded on November 27, 1980, as the women's wing of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The AAPRP understood that the solution to the many problems facing women is organization and political education. The AAWRU understands that real, lasting freedom for African women is possible only through Pan-Africanism, which the AAPRP defines as the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. It is only through the unification of all sectors of our people, African women in particular, that we can reclaim every inch of our land in Africa from the grips of neo-colonialism and imperialism. Our demands as African women are inseparable from the object of seizing political and economic power from bourgeois society. African women must come to understand the benefits of socialism to them. It is only through scientific socialism that the development of women is ensured. Consequently, it is only through organization and political maturity that we will arrive at this understanding and mobilize ourselves and our people for the final victory. Edam Richardson has been an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union for 2 years. She lives in Burkina Faso and is in the Adorkor Kofi Mwaba Nuhanda Work Study Circle based out of Ghana. She is also the director and co-founder of the Thomas Sankara Center for African Liberation and Unity, a revolutionary Pan-African library and political education center in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Welcome, Comrade Inem.
Okay, greetings. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Happy African Liberation Day. So I pre-wrote some stuff that I'm going to share because I just prefer to share that way. So I was asked to talk about women fighting for Pan-African unity against neo-colonialism. But one of the things that came up on our call when I was preparing for this was neo-colonialism as an inherently patriarchal system of exploitation. So I want to begin by talking about the ways in which neo-colonialism is inherently patriarchal. As you may know, colonialism and neo-colonialism impact every facet of life for colonized people. So there's no way to analyze any aspect of our lives while ignoring the reality of neo-colonialism and imperialism. But since neo-colonialism is fundamentally an economic system, I want to begin by focusing on how the neo-colonial economic relationship between the African worker and the local and/or international bourgeoisie leads to forms of oppression and exploitation that are gendered and that impact men and women in different ways. So the first thing I want to state is that in the African continental context, as well as in other parts of the world, A neo-colonial economy is an extremely extractive economy. African economies are extractive economies dependent on the exportation of raw materials, and for many states, especially reliant in particular on the exportation of petroleum and minerals. Perhaps only second to agriculture, mining and resource extraction is the cornerstone of many African economies. Nigeria is heavily reliant on crude oil exportation. Ghana and Burkina Faso and Mali are heavily reliant on their gold extraction. Niger has been historically dependent on the exportation of uranium. For Botswana, it is diamond mining. For Azania, which if you don't know is South Africa, the economy today is a little more mixed and industrialized, but if you focus on the indigenous non-settler population, you still see a dependence on mining with too many minerals coming out of Azania to list here. Of course, the largest concentration of minerals in the world are found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as in the Central African Republic. I want to highlight how dependent African countries are on resource extraction within this conversation on neocolonialism and gender, because this is such a significant sector of the economy that enforces a very rigid gender division of labor. The first thing I want to state outright is that we must understand that while women are often indirectly barred from participating in one of the largest sectors of the African economy, the men within the mining sector are by no means in an enviable position here. Work within the neo-colonial economy is based on the super exploitation of the African worker. So the male workers, unlike the typically male European CEOs of the mining companies, are also oppressed by patriarchal and imperialist extractive capitalism. However, I do want to focus especially on how women are impacted by this, because in some ways that might be a little less obvious here. The first thing that I can say about this is that much like colonialism, neo-colonialism can be very destructive to the African family. Much like during the colonial period, the neo-colonial period forcibly or coercively separates men from the rest of their families, as they often must migrate to wherever they can find work. Women do this as well, though because several significant sectors of the economy are closed off to them, men are more likely to move for work as their wives and children stay behind in the cities and villages. We also see this form of migration on an international level as the resources of Africa flow overwhelmingly towards the West. We see that normally, though not at all exclusively, the migrants that take the risky voyages across the Sahara or who attempt to leave the Sahel via boat, whether from Senegal or from North Africa, tend more often to be men. In the Sahel region of Africa, this is actually pretty obvious and visible. It is common to meet women whose husbands live far away, whether in a small mining town elsewhere or in Europe. The men usually do send whatever money they can back home to provide for their families as much as they can, but it is usually never enough. The women are often put into positions where they also need to work outside of the home. Women's work and men's work within the neo-colony are markedly different. Here in Burkina Faso, it is a given. You can see signs on the streets of Ouagadougou that will state, "We are looking for women to work for us," followed by a phone number. The type of work is usually not specified because it is implied. Women are specifically sought to work as cooks, cleaners, and waitresses. These jobs are specifically reserved for women, particularly work as cooks and cleaners, with men being either directly or indirectly barred from these fields which represent devalued labor. The overall way that labor is divided leads to the double or triple exploitation of women because women must work within the home as well as outside of the home. They are responsible for childcare, cooking, cleaning, and more or less all other forms of domestic work at home. And then they must work outside of the home, sometimes carrying out these same forms of labor in the homes of others. Men often cannot or will not contribute to work within the home evenly or sometimes at all. For some men, this is because they are physically separated from their wives and children due to the structure of the neo-colonial economy and the types of work made available to them. The one thing that really does ease women's burden in this case is that often in these situations, the women will either live with their family or extended family or with their husband's families or extended families. So we don't see a lot of the single parent phenomenon that we might see in the imperialist core here, because childcare and domestic responsibilities are sometimes collectivized among extended family units or even within neighborhoods and villages. However, because men are more likely to work in a relatively more valued sector of the economy, even if it is extremely exploitative work, even when they are physically available to share domestic responsibilities, their work is seen as outside of their purview and they won't contribute. In Burkina Faso, this is usually pronounced pretty directly, since many people, whether men or women, will state that women are naturally better suited for housework and that men should be able to maintain their position as the head of the household by being the primary provider of money. Though, as I already pointed out, women are working outside of the home as well. It is only if there's a fundamental economic change in Africa that these oppressive gender dynamics can change. And this fundamental economic change can only occur if workers in Africa seize the means of production and if Africa can find a pathway to some form of industrialization. There's so much that I have not even had the chance to touch upon here, but just to briefly point out, one of the reasons why there is such a huge reliance on the exploitation of domestic workers is in part because of the lack of industrialization and access to modern appliances throughout various parts of the continent. The working classes in the urban areas will often purchase the domestic labor of working women in the villages because it is really very hard for a man and a woman to work outside of the home, to have 5 or 6 children between the two of them, and to have access to very few modern appliances. The domestic labor that they purchase often substitutes for the vacuum cleaner, laundry machine, or dishwasher that they do not have access to. Of course, if men begin to contribute to domestic responsibilities to the best of their abilities, the level of domestic exploitation will decrease. However, only socialism and industrialization can truly change the inherently patriarchal conditions created by neocolonialism. This can only succeed in a unified Africa. We have already seen it attempted in a divided Africa. Socialism brought enormous strides to women's emancipation in Burkina Faso while it lasted. However, socialism in a divided Africa tends not to last very long. Men need to be re-socialized not to view domestic work as inherently feminine so that women have the time and ability to contribute to building a unified socialist Africa. This will emancipate both the men and the women from oppressive and exploitative work. So that's what I prepared. Thank you.
Asante Sana, Comrade Inem. Thank you very much to both of our panelists for that knowledge, for the way you articulated, the struggle in particular parts of the world and all over the world and throughout the diaspora. And we haven't had enough. We want to hear more from you, from each of you, Inem and Comrade Sikwe. And so I want to ask both of our panelists some questions. And the first, and either of you could take this, Inem or Comrade Sikwe, or both of you, if you feel so inspired. But the first question that I want to ask you, comrades, is what do you see as the barriers to recruitment and retention of African women and youth in Pan-African organizations and the fight for unity? And I can repeat that if you need me to. I'll ask it one more time. What are the barriers to recruitment and retention of African women and youth in Pan-African organizations and the fight for unity? Now, if Inem wants to take that one.
Okay, I could take that. So to give an example of an experience I had recently that's coming to mind. So we've had numerous orientation sessions and events that we've hosted out here for the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So, different film screenings, different sorts of events and orientation sessions. And out here, we tend not to get a lot of participation from the women. And recently, we actually had a woman participate in an AAPRP orientation session for the first time out here. And I remember I was talking to her about, how can we get more women to come and why aren't women showing up as much? I would say that, Pan-Africanism and politics here in general is a bit of a boys' club, even though there is this revolutionary history of during the time of Thomas Sankara, women being elevated to high positions. It's also a country that has experienced now like 30 years of counter-revolution. So one of the things that she was saying to me was that a lot of women feel, or a lot of the men also feel that like if the women are participating in politics, that they won't be considered desirable as partners. That they'll feel that there's a level of threat to them within their households, that they'll feel that the women might be more educated than them, or that the women won't have time to balance doing political work and also fulfilling domestic responsibilities. So this young woman in the orientation, her argument was that we need to show women that they can be part of Pan-Africanism, and also that men can still be the head of the household. So I think that also shows that like we need to do a lot of work around some of the some of how we're socialized to view gender and women. And I just want to point out a couple of resources in particular that I have really found helpful here. So Thomas Sankara is, it's amazing how relevant his works are. And because this is his country, I can reference him so easily here, and people will be like, okay, yes, that's true. Like he made some points here. So of course, what is it? Women's Emancipation and the African Freedom Struggle by Thomas Sankara. And another work that I just find so relevant here in Burkina Faso, relevant to the point where I want to translate it into French because I think it speaks so much to this context here, is actually a book by Frelimo. It's called The Mozambican Woman in the Revolution. I think that book would really resonate on the ground in terms of some of the things that they talk about. That is a pretty common reality for women here, not universal by any means, but still things that are not super uncommon struggles here. So things like really young marriages, coercive or forced marriages, and yeah, those are like some of the things that make it really hard sometimes to recruit women, because there's still very much it's still very much, there's an idea that the primary role and responsibility of women is still domestic work within the household.
Brilliant, Inem. That was a really great response. It's amazing how, we can have all of this, centuries of technological development and scientific advancement and all these, transformations over time. But still, these very rigid ideas about gender remain, and they're really hard to get rid of. So I appreciate you speaking directly to that, those very toxic ideas that, we all have to kind of, remind ourselves and check ourselves, because we've all gone through this socialization process where we're taught those things. But thank goodness, we are raising generations, and we are, hopefully examples of a change that will come in the near future. I have another question for you, comrade. And along the same lines, just thinking about, the unique role that women and youth play in the movement. And that is my question. What do you think is the, specific and unique revolutionary role that women and youth play in this struggle as it relates to, neo-colonialism or to, African liberation in general? But what are some of those kind of particular things that you think women and youth bring to the struggle?
Okay, I'm going to touch on that, but I also wanted to talk just really quickly, because you mentioned sort of like the major technological and scientific strides that we've made over the past, decades and centuries. And so, but I think we also have to understand that, a lot of the like, how do I explain? Like the socialization around women and gender is also, directly tied to the material conditions and material reality here. And so, maybe we have made tremendous strides in terms of some of the technology that we have access to, but kind of like what I was touching on before, if we don't have access to this technology here, if Africa is unindustrialized, and if there's not going to be a technology transfer happening in any sort of way, that also perpetuates these same material conditions, because in some cases, we do need to have at least one person at the home that's staying around and washing, hand washing the clothes, or cooking every day because there's not a fridge at the house. And so if that's like the reality here, it's normally going to be women, because of how the economy is centered. Men are going to be recruited into the mines or other forms of like hard labor and of that sort of nature. And it's going to be women usually who are going to without the technology being accessible here, with the material conditions being what it is, going to stay in the house and perform these forms of labor. So just to kind of, sorry, I know that wasn't the question you just asked, but I did want to touch on it.
No, I appreciate that. That was really important. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I had a bit of difficulty connecting. I mean, I'm a mother, so I had to quickly run and breastfeed my son. Those are the challenges and the kind of balances one really has to sort of make as an activist, but also as a mother. You spoke of the uniqueness of the woman in the struggle towards the liberation. Look, as I said earlier, my understanding of women, especially Black women in particular, is that we are very sacred beings, we are very spiritual beings, and that's where our ancestors entrust us with the foresight, the wisdom to foresee things, the wisdom to guide our people to take the right path. So if our Black people were to attempt any fight really to achieve anything progressive for the Black masses, they would really have to deeply consult the Black woman. And you see the Black woman in very key spaces, in indigenous leadership, they are there. You see them in the churches providing leadership. You see them providing visionary leadership. And if you were to go as far as in the 1800s in South Africa, for example, you would find Umama Mkabayi Gajama, who was a military leader and who had the foresight to go to her father and said, look, I know you have this wife who gave you 2 girl children already, but our monarch is at stake. Our Zulu kingship is at stake and you need a son. So Mkabayi, being a child, went and looked for a wife so that the father can marry and then give birth to a son. And that was the case. A son was born, Usenzanga Khona was born to the father. And thus the Zulu kingdom was able to continue through the foresight of a young woman who was Mkabayi Gajama, through the foresight of the visionaries of the ancestors, through a young Black woman. So I think we play a very important role in the struggle of the liberation of Black people. We play a very important role in safeguarding the future of Black people and our children. So I think it goes without saying that the liberation of Black people can never be possible without our own emancipation and participation as Black women.
Asante Sana, comrade. Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And it kind of, brings me to another thought that is perhaps connected to some aspects of what you said, and also, some things that Inam mentioned. And I am curious, to know what that looks like, right, in your part of the world, because as, was mentioned, I think earlier in this panel, across the diaspora, women are having different experiences based on their material realities, based on the social structure of their society and the political structure of their society, et cetera. And so I'm curious about what you all think about social entrepreneurship, or if you have thought about that at all. In the United States, we have this whole, support Black businesses, motto that has a lot of problems, laden in it. I understand the foundation of it, that we want to support small, businesses and support our community and make sure that money circulates within our community like it does many other ethnic groups. But that doesn't free us, making individual businesses and companies more rich for their own sake doesn't free all of us. What is the collective good? And so, along the lines of social entrepreneurship, business or economic opportunities developed specifically to solve social issues and positively impact communities. And these are things that could dismantle neo-colonialism. What do y'all think about the viability of that, or the impact and use of those sort of projects?
Thank you. I think in Azapo, for example, we have a long-standing program or project, if you like, that is called Stretch the Rand. So the purpose of that is to do exactly what you're saying, to support Black businesses and projects in their various spaces. So we, being the majority of people in this country, unlike Black people in America, for example, this kind of project, if done correctly, can definitely move our people from, this point of being impoverished or under, what's the term? Okay, let's say from the point of being impoverished. So it can move us from there to a point of self-reliance and economic emancipation if done correctly, So I think it's a great program. Yes, we do that in many other programs. So I feel like it's a program that needs to be strengthened, intensified, so that it benefits, women, it benefits young people, and it benefits us as a race. If done properly, I think it has a potential of making a huge economic change.
Thank you for that, comrade. Inem, did you want to speak to that question as well? Or?
Okay, sure. And I think I can almost sort of touch on the previous question a little bit here too. Just to say that, women, even if they're not as directly involved, particularly here in Pan-Africanism in the same way that men are, women have always been engaged in class struggle, have always been struggling for the liberation of their people, their communities in this continent. So one of the things that comes to mind, particularly when you talk about social entrepreneurship, a lot of women are involved in production. So I think of how Burkina Faso is one of the biggest producers of shea butter, and how it's primarily women who are often working in some sort of cooperative form, who are at the forefront of production in this sector. I think it can provide short-term emancipation, and I think it's necessary for, if we're going to be building Pan-Africanism, we need to have some sort of some sort of financial situation to finance our organizations, finance our struggle, and also just to survive as a people. But I don't think that there's going to be any concrete sort of large changes if under this sort of extractive capitalism or any form of capitalism. And I think that Africa needs to industrialize. And I think in order for that to happen, it needs to unify, and it needs to unify under socialism with workers controlling production at the means of production. So.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. If only we can just operationalize everything that y'all are saying. It seems like we're knocking at the door, to liberation. Like, these are exactly the things that we need to do. And the next question is kind of related, I think, to this. This is all kind of flowing together. But this is a question about revolutionary ideology and the significance of having, revolutionary ideology and being principled in the work toward liberation. So how can revolutionary ideology help African people to achieve Pan-Africanism and ultimately liberation and, by way of scientific socialism? What is the significance of having a revolutionary ideology?
I can just say, I don't think we're getting anywhere without an ideology. I think that ideology helps us understand what we're doing and why, and what our objective is and what the purpose is. And also it allows us to look at, concrete examples historically of what's worked and what hasn't worked. So I think, ideology in a way is everything. I mean, we need practice as well. It's not just all theory, but we can't really practice without theory. We're not going to get very far. So and I think this also is very much like what I was touching on before when I was talking about some of our struggles to recruit women. It's an ideological struggle, which is why I talk about how, we need to reference Thomas Sankara, or we need to translate the works from Frelimo or from the PAIGC, specifically from the women revolutionaries that dealt with similar forms of patriarchy. So I think, it's an ideological struggle, even to get women to participate in this sort of way. at least in this context?
I think without a clear politically grounded ideology, it will be difficult to even attempt to start a revolution, because you wouldn't be able to locate, the basis of your struggle. You wouldn't be able to locate who the enemy is, who the target is, who the objective is. So I think a grounded political ideology is critical for anyone attempting any type of revolution, particularly Black women, because, as mentioned before, our struggle is unique. Our struggle, some may reference it as threefold. Our struggle is multifaceted. So it's very possible and quite easy for some of us to be insinuated in other people's struggles. And if we do not go back to our political grounding, to our ideological grounding, we may then very well find ourselves following each and every one. And then at the end, finding that we are not fighting for the same cause, we are not fighting for the same objective. So it's critical that there is a very clear and political ideological set of principles that ground each and every movement, especially that of Black women, if they wish to find themselves liberated in this day and age.
Right on, right on. Much appreciation and gratitude to the comrades, Zikwe, Inam. Thank you so much for your contributions tonight. And y'all have a good evening. Take care. Luta continua and forward ever.
Backward never.
Thank you. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons.
Thank you.
Africa's recital. Heart to heart. Searching, I ask. Dearest Mama Africa, how are you doing? Then thoughtfully she recites. Oh, darling son of the soil, I saw this coming. The how am I doing is a burden like a boulder on my shoulder that I have been carrying from long ago. My cold story has been told, somehow sold like gold to young and old. Even generations to come will want to know. Check your history, it will tell how I yell for help in my hell-hole cell situation, articulating the age of European discovery spell that left me lingering in a blazing, mind-boggling jail. The blowout of foreign behavior and far-off belief, demonizing everything else, even the life I live. I spit and cast a curse on boats of the wicked ones, those that waters unknowingly carried to my seashores. The how am I doing is really hard to express without fuming with bitterness, recalling the birth of colonization madness, a malicious agenda of perverted, immoral, mindless missionaries, the legalization of looting and weeping that left me cataleptic. Yes, I mean lifeless. Look, I still bear scars, mutilations tattooed on my naked skin, from the soles of my feet up to my broken skull for one and all to see. The launching of slavery, with its vicious, lynching soul anguish. Nightmares have invaded my dream cosmos. I hear echoes of bitterly tortured masses. I feel chains and shackles choking me to death. I want to live and lead, but I can't breathe. Freedom is a dream I would like to end my sleepless nights. The how am I doing is a loud bell ringing in my ears, a big bang of a drum warning the nation, a thunderous voice shouting, African children, African children, African children, reminding me of how bad I feel about the notorious Berlin Conference, where I was once more bullied, where I was once more stripped naked, where I was once more gang raped, and where I was finally sliced into palatable shreds. Now, on my flesh and blood, they all feed belly full. I am their dreamland of milk and honey. From their molestation, my womb carries monsters that are called ministers, sucking my ever-engorged breasts while their alien dads starve you to death. Your loss is their gain. Now you know. Go tell the world, how am I doing?
Revolutionary greetings. The Democratic Party of Guinea African Democratic Rally was founded on May 14, 1947, and was the decisive force in the victorious fight against colonialism and in the building of the Guinean nation. Through the ups, downs, and curves of revolutionary struggle, the PDG RDA stands. And on this African Liberation Day, it is our honor to present the Kwame Ture Black Star of Labor Award to the PDG RDA, the Democratic Party of Guinea African Democratic Rally. The PDG has blazed the revolutionary trail, modeling for us organizational discipline, collective leadership with the almighty people at the front, the full participation of women, and the resolute determination to achieve a unified socialist Africa. The names of PDG-RDA ancestors ring in our revolutionary hearts: Ahmed Sekou Toure, Haja Mafori Bangura, El Haj Biro Kante, Haja Aminata Toure, Comrade Kwame Ture, and so many others who guide us through their lasting legacy of work and study and struggle for the people. We have not forgotten the quest and the fight to bring home Mohamed Ture, and we are with you in this fight. We honor you today, Democratic Party of Guinea, African Democratic Rally, as we present you with the Kwame Ture Black Star of Labor Award. A luta continua, prête pour la révolution, ready for revolution.
Greetings, 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 Africans. All right, all right. Do we feel fired up? Are we ready to go? Are we ready to smash neo-colonialism? Happy African Liberation Day 2022. I would like to take this time to thank all of our facilitators of the panels. I want to thank all of our panelists. So we heard from our Cuban comrade family. I want to give a shout out to all of our awardees. Congratulations. Thank you so much for all of the work you all have done. Again, to remind you, we gave awards to the National Union of Eritrean Women. We gave an award to our comrade Teodora Gomez, and they both earned the Mawana Kayate Award. We also gave an award to our comrade Nia Ardo with the AAPRP Legacy Award. Special shout out to our panelists, Ajamu Baraka from the Black Alliance for Peace. Thank you again to our other comrade, Chance Imad from the Palestinian Youth Movement. We want to also give a shout out to our panelists for the Pan-African Women's Union, our comrade Shiwaka Dalbula, and our comrade Anem Richardson. We also want to give thanks to our comrades who put on today's presentation. Thank you to all the folks doing work behind the scenes. Thank you to our audience members. Please be sure to join us tomorrow for part 2 of African Liberation Day. We will be live streaming the African Liberation Day March and Rally, and it's going to be live from Guinea-Bissau, so you don't want to miss it. Make sure you join our AAPRP YouTube channels. You can also join on Facebook. We also have a Twitter page. There are 3 different ways that you can join in and watch the African Liberation Day celebration continue tomorrow from Guinea-Bissau. Again, we give a special thanks to our awardees, a special thanks to our panelists, as well as our facilitators, to everyone who understands that we need to smash neo-colonialism. We thank you. And if you are not in an organization working for justice, after hearing all of the speakers from today's event, we strongly suggest that you find an organization that is working for justice immediately, because smashing neo-colonialism is not something that can happen with one person. It's not something that can happen with 20 people. It is something that is going to take all of us. As we heard from our comrades earlier today, the reason that we did not just have speakers from the AAPRP is because we as a party understand that joining a organization working for justice is still better than no one being in an organization. So we have people from the Black Alliance for Peace who are in cahoots with us because they understand that we need to organize together. We have people from the Palestinian Youth Movement because they understand, coming to ALD to speak, that we all need each other's support to help address the issues that don't just affect Palestinians and don't just affect indigenous people, but they affect Africans, and the oppressors that affect Africans affect indigenous people and Palestinians, and so on and so forth. So we must remember, we not only need to smash neo-colonialism, and we all need to do that, but we need to smash patriarchy, we need to smash homophobia and other systems of oppression that are affecting people everywhere get access to their land, having it back, and having control of their resources. Congratulations for a 2022 African Liberation Day. We welcome you. We appreciate you for joining us, and we hope that we will see you tomorrow and join an organization working for justice. Amandala Awetu, Izweletu, E-Africa. Woo! Yes.